Hello and welcome to another episode of Crystal Confab. I'm joined by my fellow confabbers, Kyle and Adam, and we're talking about one of those minerals that I forget how much I love until I start going through the drawers where all my collection is located and through all the cases and all of the shelves, and I notice, oh goodness, I have a lot of calcite. And it's one of those things that I think I'm not alone in letting it kind of creep up on us. It sounds like Kyle might be in a similar situation there.
I am absolutely in the same boat. I realized as I was gathering and getting things ready, I have a full smorgasbord of calcites that I have acquired and get to eat. I'm not actually eating them.
Oh, good. We were getting worried for a second, Kyle. Then yeah. I must admit, I've got like one of each color because I have to have one of everything type of thing. But for me, calcites don't really excite me that much. So I'm putting down a challenge to the two of you today. Let's see if you can titillate me about calcites.
Well, let's start with just how cool it is. Like before we really dive in, I was I am always amazed at the sheer diversity that we get in calcites, and I know that this was something that Ashley talked about in our Pride Crystals episode. But like from a crystallographic perspective, I think calcite might win for the greatest number of crystal habits of any species. I've never sat down to tally everybody else, but there are over 150 different habits that have been mapped out for calcite in single crystal form. That does not include twins. So twinned crystals can double that at least, depending on the law of twinning that we've got. And then we've got things like parallel growth and sceptered growth and polycrystalline growth and epitaxial growth. I mean, like it's just mind-boggling how many crystal forms there are of calcite. There's also a lot of it. There's more than you'd expect. Most of the calcite in the Earth's crust is locked up in limestone. It's only about 4% of the crust by weight, but it's almost 40% of all exposed rock on the surface of the Earth. And limestones are a pretty diverse group. That number gets a little bit larger if we include metamorphosed limestone, which we know under the name marble in most cases, but it could also be lapis lazuli, which is by volume mostly calcite. There's just so much going on. And then you get every color option. It plays nicely with so many different crystals. I mean, calcite's got a little bit of something in it for everybody. So yeah, I went through the collection and I'll show them off a little bit later. But I mean, it's just amazing how many kinds of calcites there are. But what is it that you appreciate most about calcite, Adam?
I think, and I wanted to kind of quiz you two a little bit about this. When it comes to the different colors that you can get calcite in, would you say that of all the crystals, that if you want to get a rainbow of crystals, calcite gives you the best range with ease? Like I know tourmalines obviously come in every rainbow, but some of them are a bit, you've got to kind of look a bit hard. But apart from, I don't know, can you get a purple or a violet calcite or a dark blue? I haven't seen that. Um,
You can, in fact. This one's lavender, but this is from a deposit in China. It looks a little bit grayer on the screen than it is in real life. And just this year, there was a new find of a fairly bright purple calcite in upstate New York.
Yeah, okay, amazing. Well, then I guess, I love what Ashley shared with us in the Pride episode where she talked about, the range of different colors. And I think that range of different colors can be really valuable in where I mainly use calcite. So, one kind of basic tip that I teach crystal beginners, if you want to work out whether a crystal's calcite, it's really quite obvious to tell just by touch. It kind of feels waxy or soapy most of the time. And so, what I find calcite's really, really great for is for what do we use soap for? Hopefully, everyone knows the answer to that question washing away. So, for me, calcites are a great general cleanser. Now, when we think about cleansing crystals, normally 9 out of 10 people would probably go selenite, be the first one that they'd list. And selenite is great, and I use it for a whole range of different cleansing. It's kind of your jack of all trades cleanser in that way. But what I love about the calcites is because of that range of colors, we can use them specially to get rid of or to cleanse away blockages or issues that we may have, type of thing. So let me kind of zone in on a few. So good old blue calcite, probably one of the first calcites that I worked with and that I had. It's in my book, Crystal Connections. I find that really great one. Obviously, they work really well with the chakras. So the throat chakra can really help to clear away things there. I love them. When we look at the chakras, but we often hear that chakras are open or closed. But, this is energy we're talking about. Energy doesn't open and close. It's kind of can be overactive or underactive. So I find calcite's really good when we've got an overactive chakra. So with the throat chakra being overactive, we might dominate conversations. We might speak clearly. We may be a poor listener. And I find blue calcite is a really good one to kind of wash away some of that excess energy and simmer that down. The soft blue color of blue calcite does help us with forgiveness, with compassion, with understanding other people, with looking at the bigger picture. I find it counteracts selfishness. So really, really beautiful in that way. Another couple of calcites I love are the pink calcites. Now, I find that we get our kind of basic calcite or soft pink calcite, which is often known as manganocalcite. And I find that one to be really great for heartbreak. So if anyone is going through something where you've gone through a breakup recently, you've lost a loved one recently, maybe there's been some bad news, you've lost a job, any of those types of things, and it's really sitting heavy on your heart, this is where I'd go for my manganocalcite. But then we have the cobaltocalcite, which is a bit more vibrant pink. And that's for those ones that are, people that are upset that their husband left them for the receptionist 10 years ago and they're still banging on about it. Any of those issues that are really deep in there, cobaltocalcite, anything with cobalt kind of components I find really magical, really potent. And this is a really great one for helping with that. Red calcite, I would use that for issues if you're having problems with vitality. Sometimes called the lifeblood of Mother Earth. Red calcite is a really beautiful one for cleansing away different things that may be stopping us from feeling our most vital self and feeling that really beautiful, vibrant energy in that way. Often when we look at vibrancy and energy and health, it's due to either lack of enough of the good stuff or too much of the bad stuff. And calcite can help us to especially detoxify on an energetic level and even come to an awareness of how physically we may need to detoxify physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. I guess the final one I'll kind of touch on as well is, good old green calcite. I hear people talk a lot about money blocks and different issues around that. Reach for your green calcite. That can be a really beautiful one in that way for clearing away. So really, if there's something that you want to rid yourself in your life, there are some powerful crystals out there. I love apophyllite for cleansing. I love polysite for cleansing. I love cryolite. There are, azurine is really great for cutting ties. There's lots of kind of high-end rare minerals that are really good for cleansing. But if you're just looking for, I need to get rid of something, for me, you can either go for your selenite, but if you want to go more specific for an area or maybe a chakra, then go for the calcite. And that's why I guess I will give 2 points to calcite because of their wide variety of colours. They specialise in different areas, whereas selenite's kind of your cleansing generalist. So that's how I like them. But you find they're really great with clarity. Is that right, Kyle?
I mean, it's a pretty easy follow-on from what you're talking about. And as I mentioned before we dived in, I originally had a different subject. I was only going to focus on honey calcite because that may or may not be my favorite. But as I gathered and collected, I realized there were so many. And I remember working with each of them, and they all bring a sense for me of clarity. If you think about its makeup, calcium carbonate. Calcium makes up our bones, gives us inner strength, gives us that support, like it helps us be human. It makes up a lot of the Earth's crust, as we talked about, but its formation coming from those prehistoric times where the calcium in the shells of these creatures broke down over time, became something else, formed something else. Nicholas will be able to clarify because I'm probably not getting this exactly right, but they've gone through these different layers of formation and unformation and reformation, and they require heat, they require pressure. It's like when something has become something after being something else, after being something else, it like brings that story forward. So it helps us when we have lots of information on the table. I am getting somewhere. When there's lots going on, there's lots to think about, there's lots overwhelming us, and we want to find some clarity to move through things. Carbonate, the other side of it, carbon always helps that purification, that cleansing element, as Adam was talking about. And what I love about calcite, that formation, this is a really amazing geode that is from Morocco. This came in a batch of clear quartz geodes. And I remember, oh, look, this one's a bit heavier than all the other ones. It must be really full of crystals. We were at work just opening geodes. Bam, this one was all calcite. And you can tell by the waxiness, it's not coming up on the camera, unfortunately, but it is 100% calcite. And I remember it being at a time where I was trying to figure out who I was as a brand, which was really interesting. It sort of came to me at this time of finding clarity, finding a bit of purpose, finding a bit of understanding of myself. And I realized going back through, I've got quite a few pieces in quite a few different colors, in quite a few different forms. This is cave calcite from Mexico, really interesting formation. They have this, let's put all the information on the table. Let's see what's in front of you. Let's see what you can do. Find a bit of clarity with what's happening. It forces you to stop. There's this other thing that I really love about calcite is its heft, its weight, right? It's pretty, it can sort of refract light really well, but for its size, it will generally be heavier than other crystals. And that weight for me is always a beautiful like stopper. Heavy crystals for me always remind me to stop, to like sit with the thing. Find a bit of breath, find a bit of slow down, and then you can figure everything out. When you stop rushing, when you stop moving so quickly, you can actually find a bit more clarity. And then we dive into sort of the colored ones. As I mentioned, honey calcite being probably my favorite, it helps me to find clarity creatively. When I'm creatively blocked, when I'm finding myself unsure of what to do creatively, when I like want to write, when I want to talk about crystals, when I want to create content, when I want to do anything in that sort of creative force, I find honey calcite really dives into that warmth, that positivity, that get all of the stuff that holds you back from making it so that you can make it, so that you can do the thing, as I like to say. One of my absolute favorites, and this is like red honey calcite. This one comes from Pakistan. I absolutely adore this energy. It just has this nourishing warmth that allows you to commit to yourself, to commit to something, to not have to overthink, and to just go, this is what I'm going to work with today. This is how I'm going to dive into things. And I love that yes aspect that calcite brings, that forward motion, that let's see it and then let's do it. It's not just about clarity, it's about having the clarity and then knowing what to do next. With our like green calcites, working from the heart, what have I gone through? Mangano is another really good one. What emotional distress, what trauma, what heartache, what crap have I gone through? How can I move that out of the way so that I can move forward and let the good in, let the positive in, let that warmth and happiness and joy come in? These heart-centered calcites really do that. And on cobalto calcite, this is one that I really, really enjoy working with when it comes to worthiness. There's something about cobalto calcite and allowing yourself to be worthy, whatever it is about the combination of the two, that just unlocks this freedom, this openness, this you can see that there is more out there. I find cobalto calcite has been a really enthusiastic supporter, and something that these are the two pieces that I have. They're not huge, they're not massive, but there is so much that comes from them, and there is so much energy. I would argue it is probably the most potent of the colored Calcites, it has, for its density, for its size, for the amount of calcite, it just really hits, or for me personally, it really, really hit and was uh, key to unlocking things, pun intended. And then I will want to touch just briefly on the like Caribbean calcite, Caribbean blue, because it's a blend of aragonite and calcite. Calcite and aragonite are, of course, polymorphs. They're in the same family. They are just created through a little bit of different heat and pressure. And so I like it because it is a blend of the aragonite and the calcite. There is this sort of layered energy, and I do love to call upon it, but I don't call it calcite. I just call it Caribbean blue in commas because it gives it the umbrella name and helps with that. You know, it has a few different things going on in it. So as Adam said, there's all these different colors, all of these different flavors that we can work with that connect in different ways. There is a clarity that can come from them, and I would say go for clear calcite. There are so many people that overlook clear calcite, that don't connect with it. It could be dogtooth, the dogtooth calcites as well. Really, really amazing formation that you find a lot. I find clear calcite in any form, like, cut the crap, get it all on the table. What's in the today box? What's in the tomorrow box? What's in the you can deal with it next week box? Like, it really helps to organize, get shit together, pardon my French, and allow you to get yourself in order. So if you need to study, if you have a lot of work to do, if you are swamped and feeling that like, oh my God, my mind, I can't deal with all this information. No, you can. You're actually really smart, really intelligent. There's just a lot going on, and you just need to clear it all out and put it all in front of you. And that like ability for clear calcite to like, say you've got like this pile of notes to go through, it like spreads it all out, highlights the important bits, allows the other bits to fall away, and gives you that sense of, oh, okay, I can actually accomplish some tasks here. I can actually get through what I'm trying to get through. I can actually achieve something and feel good about it, if that makes sense.
Definitely. Kyle, can you elaborate a bit more on the Caribbean blue? Because I know it's a relatively newer crystal. It did kind of flare up as well. It's not from the Caribbean, I believe. Do you want to share a little bit more about it for people that haven't heard of this one before?
It is absolutely not from the Caribbean or the Caribbean. It comes from Pakistan. It is, as you can see, you've got these sort of brown layers where the aragonite comes through into the calcite. It came through 2021, 2020, like it's like the last 5 years, it really hit the market. And it has this, like, I think it like came to the world when we all needed to calm down and be okay with being at home. Like, it was funny that it was like during this time when we all needed to like go with the flow because everything was changing, everything was constrained, everything was like not great for the world. It kind of came as this like, everyone wants to be on holiday, everyone wants to like be somewhere else, let's all take a breath, like let's actually have it in our hands. Because I find aragonite on the other end of that spectrum really like supportive. I find it really comforting and really like grounding in its own way. So I think that sort of working together thing was really, really lovely. And I think that whole timing of crystals and minerals, they kind of come out quite often exactly when they're meant to.
Oh, very much so. I've noticed there were some interesting ones that came out around the year 2000. Things like quantum quattro is a classic example of kind of being discovered when the world might need it the most, type of thing as well. I did want to ask you another. I was kind of reflecting as you were talking as well, Kyle, that out of the three of us, you probably win the award for most crystals worn on a day. Um, but then I was thinking, in all my jewelry, and I do have a large collection I've amassed over the years. I think I've got a pink Koboto calcite pendant, and I think that's it. Is this a crystal that you tend to wear a lot, or is it more a carry one, a meditate one, a grid one for you?
I will very rarely wear calcite for me because it's a 3 in the hardness. As jewelry, it will break, it will scratch. Even though I am a maximalist, even though I love my jewels, I also am spatially unaware, an absolute klutz, and the breaker of things that can break. And that's why I also don't wear fluorite, because fluorite is still soft enough that any fluorite I have worn, I will break. Sometimes I'll pop a bracelet on to meditate with when I know I'm not doing anything. But if I'm like leaving the house, I am not someone that is delicate enough to wear calcite, but there are many people that can. And cobalto calcite, especially, can look incredible as jewelry and can make good jewelry because they will often use the matrix, the base matrix, which gives it a bit more stability and sturdiness so it can like show off.
Yeah. What about yourself, Nicholas? How do you love to work with calcite?
Calcite is one of these really kind of evolutionary stones that maybe doesn't have all of the bells and whistles of our moldavites and phenicites and herderites, but is still really transformative. And it can help us grow incrementally, or it can push us off the cliff so we, you know, move real fast in that growth. If we want to kind of analyze where this sense of change, transformation, growth in life comes from, there's a few ways that we can take a look at it. So I've got a whole bunch here that I pulled, more than I'm sure I will get a chance to show, but I've got this kind of fun piece of cobalto and calcite, which is actually on top of optical calcite. But in that optical calcite, you can see this fun rhombic shape. So one of the more common unit cells that we see in calcite is this rhombohedron. If you took a cube and you made it tilt, you'd end up with a rhombohedron. But it's all of these parallel faces, parallel lines, parallel angles. And so it helps us kind of connect things that seem like they're otherwise not touching. If you have these two parallel tracks in life, it intersects with them and helps us bridge them. Um, and every other crystal form that we get in calcite is made of that unit, stacked and remixed in different ways. So whether those are our so-called stellar beam calcites, this one here comes from a historic mine in McClure, Ohio called Pew Quarry. The museum I work for has received so many of these in our private donation around the time that I worked there as a student that we literally put high-end specimens like this in the gift shop. Now there's a truckload of them in the attic waiting for probably the same thing to happen. We can get really elongated forms, like the so-called dragon scale calcites. Long before that was a name, I mean, these have been popular among mineral collectors. This one is fun because it's got, and it doesn't show up super well, but there is a phantom in there that is chalcopyrite. So in sunlight, that whole thing sparkles. We can also get, you know, intermediate forms where we get the scalenihedron or the dogtooth with a scepter, with tiers of growth, but yet where it breaks off from the base, we get the same planes and faces. So there's this ability to take something really fundamental and build it up in new and exciting ways. It helps us explore. It helps our mind look for new connections. We can also take a look at the optics involved. Calcite is super birefringent. Sometimes we say doubly refractive instead. And what happens is we see this in quartz. We just don't see it as strongly with the naked eye unless you have a very, very large piece of quartz that is also very, very clear. But in calcite, it's really evident in small pieces. So as incident light comes in, one beam of light is polarized in such a way. Polarization is when we take the kind of electric and magnetic poles, because light is electromagnetism. So it's got a north and a south pole and an east and a west pole. And when they all line up together, the poles are polarized. But calcite takes that one step further and diverts it into two beams at two slightly different angles. And then depending on the orientation of the axes, those beams will be close together or farther apart. So if you get a piece of optical calcite and you put it on an image or some text and turn it, you'll see the doubled images come, close together and farther apart. And it gives us this ability of looking at things from more than one perspective, taking a deep dive into how things can be perceived from someone else's shoes, from what it'll be like in the future. What could happen if we approach this with a different mindset, with a different background, with a different set of tools? Calcite is one of those stones that's all about learning for the sake of learning. We don't necessarily have to have an end goal. Like you can learn to get the PhD, you can also just learn because you're a human being. And any day where you don't learn something new is a wasted day. To accomplish this, it helps us release old ideas, old beliefs that we've been holding on to so we can make space for that new stuff that's coming. And in this kind of combination of these influences, it helps to expand our consciousness, offer a fresh perspective, and initiate the powers of our higher mind. I also find this to be a stone of evolutionary processes. If we take a look at some historic materials, we find a book called The Living Origin of Rocks and Minerals by Walter Kloos, who in like the mid-century was he wore a lot of hats. He was an amateur geologist and natural scientist, but he was a full-time chemist and pharmacist. He was well known for his work in the anthroposophy community, but he wrote this book that kind of takes a new interpretation of the earth as a living organism, as the process within it resembling life processes. And it's based on the work of Rudolf Steiner. And he says that the appearance of limestone in the earth, which is our chief source of all calcite, almost all calcite in the earth is bound up in there, um, represents the start of a mighty process that drew animality down to earth with the help of calcium. In other words, it's taking the kind of mineral state, developing into the plant state, developing into the animal state where we can come to exist. And so it is through that lime, through that calcium, the same thing in our teeth and our bones and all of our other bits, kind of represents this power of our consciousness to come into embodiment. The solubility of our carbonate minerals, our lime and limestone, which is all calcite, demonstrates the readiness of the process of growth, of adaptation to become incarnate, to evolve. The fact that lime is so soluble and crystallizes in so many different ways shows that it is willing to explore and change and adapt and surprise us continuously. As a result, calcites intensify this kind of evolutionary quality that's embodied. They represent this imperative within us to grow and adapt and change, and they facilitate all these processes of transformation. Whenever we feel stagnant, we can call upon calcite to surprise us. So I want to just show a couple of my specimens. This is like one of the most iconic things from my home state here in Florida. These were mined. They're no longer, the pit is no longer active, but the place where they were mined was less than an hour from where I grew up. You can still find these calcitized fossils. This one is a giant Venus clam. I've got some whelks and other things. You can find them elsewhere, but like the really iconic deposit is now gone. I showed off my lavender violet one from China earlier, and this one is twinned, although it's not got the both halves intact. I have some Welsh calcite because why not? I love the West Country, and this is what we might call a nailhead calcite with this kind of triangular pyramid on the top. A very, very strange pink calcite from Mexico that has a little, I don't know, a band, a skirt of double terminated quartz crystals along it, as if it's wearing this little belt. It is so strongly fluorescent. It might even show up on camera. Not really, but it turns brilliant red, and is super phosphorescent. But I think like one of the prizes in my collection on weirdness is a kind of calcite most people don't even know exists. So all the confabbers here are well aware of Herkimer diamonds, um, and they form in soft, carbonate-rich clay substrates. But sometimes the same process that yields the Herkimer diamonds also yields calcite. And if you're really lucky, you can find something like this. So they have this kind of scaly pattern on the outside, and this one is broken in most surfaces. So you can see the kind of cleavage planes. But when we turn it just right, we find Herkimer diamonds inside it. Here's a big one. That as big as the top joint of my thumb, as far back as it goes in there. So that's a really ugly rock from one angle, but it tells such a fascinating geological story. And this is the kind of thing that usually gets crushed for gravel in some of the mines. that are not there chiefly for people like us. So I am always surprised, enamored, enchanted with how much whimsy and creativity there is in calcite. And if we could just harness the tiniest fraction of that in our lives, I think the world would be a more joyful and a more growth-oriented place.
I love obviously people can only see one of us on screen at a time, but when you brought up that piece of calcite from Herkimer, both me and Kyle basically went through the screen trying to make sure we could have a really good look at it as well. Earlier on, you were talking about how because of the formation or the shape that calcites grow in, it almost helps us with two things that may not seem in alignment to be in alignment. Do you think calcites would be a really great one for relationships? Because obviously, with every relationship, we have two people that are often on different kind of perspectives trying to get along. Do you think calcites would be great around the home for helping a bit more relationship harmony, Nicholas?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways we can interpret this. There's that bridging of parallel things, and it feels like you're just diametrically opposed or you're moving in different directions. You just don't know how to reconcile that. It helps you make the connection. But more importantly, what we see embodied in the birefringence and that double refraction is the ability to see it through someone else's eyes. There's
Mm.
more than one way to look at a situation at all times. And calcite encourages us to be sympathetic, empathetic, compassionate about what someone else's experience is, what bias that brings to it, and also to remember that your experience and your bias prevents you from being a neutral party most of the time as well. So it's like they say, there's your story and my story and the truth. If we can experience the two extremes, we can probably meet somewhere closer to the middle. And so I think calcite is a really great problem solver. It works creatively, but it also builds this sense of community. And again, that's embodied in the way that it forms, right? My friend Marilyn Twintrees, in her trilogy of books she co-wrote with her husband Thomas, she writes something about calcite represents the kind of people who are the glue that hold things together, especially in the kind of creative processes. And if we're having those challenges in relationships, we want to look for the opportunities to build rather than to tear down. And, calcite helps to, I think, mediate between those because lime is so soluble, but it also builds so readily. And it can maybe help us pause and go, which part of the process am I in right now? And is that constructive?
So really a crystal of compromise and finding the middle ground. Astrologically, from what you just said then, would you find that calcite's either like a Cancerian or a Libran energy? I know, it's a big family and attributing them all to one sign would be hard, but as a generalization?
Because of the aqueous nature of it, the way it is so watery, the way it forms generally through sedimentary stuff, and most of our limestone is formed by what we call chemical weathering, so it gets dissolved and transported. But we also see a lot of it formed hydrothermally. If you've got, beautiful lustrous crystals, hydrothermal activity is probably involved, but there's water in either way. So it's a very Cancerian stone, particularly our uncolored, our whites, our pale and transparent ones. They have a quite a lunar vibe to them as well. But I would also posit the calcium content is inherently Saturnian, and because it's about the structure of things, and structure is necessarily limiting. But if we use structures creatively, they can lead to new and other things. That by refringence is mercurial and whimsical. It is moving and dynamic rather than static. The kind of split images that we see is very Gemini energy. So I think calcite wears a lot of hats, and it reminds us that we are the whole chart. All 12 houses in your chart span the 12 signs of the zodiac. So I think calcite embodies a little bit of the virtues of whatever is necessary to get the job done.
Love that. And for you, you've got an amazing collection there. How do you work with calcites and how would you recommend people work with calcites? Again, probably not one you're wearing too often. Is it one you like to sit with or yeah, where would you call upon it?
I think it is a great stone to have around the house. Whenever I meet people who are like, I want to give a gift to someone to put in their home or, to bring into a child's room, calcite is almost always the first place that I turn them towards because it is such a joyful, radiant, and easygoing kind of rock. So you can work with it environmentally. Anywhere I go in Florida, I'm in proximity to calcite because it's in the limestone underneath me. I think that is also why I love the parts of Great Britain that I do so intensely because there is limestone, mostly chalk, but also lias and other things that are lime rich. So, the environmental quality is great, but you can make some incredible grids and layouts with it. You can work with it in meditation. If you get some spectacular crystals that are nice and lustrous, you can imagine traveling inside them. You can, work with them as sentinels. You can also go to the garden depot and just get pebble stones that are made out of marble or limestone and put them in the garden. Bring them into your space outdoors. Use those in your grids because even common forms of it, chalk and limestone and marble, are going to be great ways to bring that calcite energy into your life. You don't have to have, big, enormous crystals all the time. It's nice. I certainly enjoy it, but it's not a requirement to work with a stone like this.
I guess, and I didn't think we'd be talking about, redecorating your home and your kitchen and your front yard today, but having a front pathway with something high in calcite in it would almost be great for one. As you get home or family members get home, you're walking along that path and it's cleansing away the unwanted energy of the day so it doesn't come into the home. But also, as other people come, they're not bringing their rubbish into your home. So it's a very simple, basic way of using calcite cleansing, but also doing up your front yard as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to share, I was kind of having flashbacks because we've talked about it in past episodes. Kyle and his family used to have an amazing crystal shop. And I used to go up there and run classes and we'd do practical classes sometimes and different things like that. I was remembering when I used to do the chakra balancing one. So, I've got lots of other videos on YouTube where I talk about chakras and overactive, underactive, and balance. And if anyone wants to kind of get a bit more into their chakra balancing, I would recommend that you need a pendulum and 21 crystals. So the pendulum you can see on my YouTube channel. I show you how to test whether your chakra is overactive, balanced, or underactive. And then what you basically do is you have a crystal for each of them, and you test each one, pop the crystal on, and what we find we'd get everyone to lay there for 10 minutes with the appropriate crystal on. Then we'd test, and we'd find that slowly each of the seven chakras would come into balance. And so, if you're wondering what crystals should I start with, for an overactive, go your calcites. Now, probably we've got most of the colors we've talked about for the seven chakras. I would probably use blue sodalite for the third eye chakra for the overactive. If it's underactive, I love the quartzes because if you think they grow in a point, so they put more energy into an energy center. So see if you can get different colored quartzes, and you may need to be a bit elaborate there on some of those different colors as well. And then I find for balancing, I love either your tourmalines or your beryls because they all grow in rods. So they tend to have this waving energy that kind of goes backwards and forwards. And so test your chakras or try it on someone else, put the appropriate crystals on, lay there, test again. And we found, I think, I don't know if you can remember this, Kyle, but we found after about 3 rounds, most people's chakras were then now, from being all over the shop, were coming to balance, weren't they?
It's one of those things where I think like you go to one extreme, you go to the other extreme, you find that center point, and it's nice to have those options to work through it. That sort of when you understand that, you can be doing too much, doing not enough, and find the Goldilocks zone
Yeah.
as it was.
Yeah, very much so. The final question I wanted to ask you both is obviously, as you've said, there's a large range of calcites that are available. There's all the simple ones, and you can go to any great crystal store, and in the tumbled stones, you can get a lot of the different colors there, or maybe some raw pieces as well. But we do have people that are crystal connoisseurs. They probably get more excited when we talk about phenakite or Libyan desert glass or something like that. If you were to try and encourage someone like that to get a high end or an exciting or a high vibration calcite or whatever you want to call it, what would you recommend, Kyle?
I would actually recommend something totally left field. I would recommend finding something that is a mineral that has formed on a calcite that has since dissolved. This is a Western Australian smoky amethyst, and you can see it's a beautiful cluster. It formed on a ROM. You can see that perfect angle right there within. It formed on a ROM of calcite that dissolved. So it has this echo of what was there before. And you can find a lot of really cool minerals that have that. And I think that is something that's really special, really unique that not everyone is going to have.
What about yourself, Nicholas?
For me, the excitement is in the sheer range of crystal forms. And once you start to move out of the things that form in anhedral masses, like all of those beautiful, brightly colored Mexican calcites, which I adore, but then we start looking at other locations that produce sharply terminated crystals and those beautiful double terminated, kind of polycrystalline on one end, stellar beams, they call them. Katrina Raphael coined that term in her crystal trilogy. We start to see a lot more movement, a lot more growth, a lot more focus happening in that versus things that are less pointy. And there are just some places that produce these exquisite, uplifting kinds of energies in their calcites. So that could be Carthage County, Tennessee. You could look at these old school Ohio calcites. Definitely check out the calcites coming from Inner Mongolia. That's where this one comes from. They are phenomenal. I saw this. I walked into a shop, saw it from across the room, and I wasn't there for a high-end purchase, and I absolutely was not there for a piece of calcite, and I'll be damned, it happened. And just start to explore. I mean, there's so much variety, and then when you do start to look at mineral associations, we've got one that I will be putting on display at work. We have more calcite than I think anything else in the collection in the museum, but we've got one that has these sprays of marcasite fibers, um, twisting, kind of squiggly marcasite fibers that form underneath the points. So they look like, 1950s silver tinsel Christmas trees inside the crystal points, and they zing. They've got just so much movement to them. So if we're thinking of calcite as that thing that's in tumbled stones and palm stones and polished obelisks, it's a joyful experience. But look for fine specimens of it, and the energy is incomparable. It just takes it to a whole new evolutionary scale.
Well, we could probably confab for another hour about all the different types of calcite that you can find, from colors to different formations and the different combinations as well. But we probably whet your appetite now, and you probably need to go do some online shopping or go and support your local crystal store. So we're going to wrap up there. We'll see you next week for our another confab, but we hopefully have awoken your love for your calcites a little bit more. Until then, take care and blessed be.